So about a year ago, at the start of 2023, a user posted the following on the social anxiety subreddit. Does anybody else just hate their own voice when it's played back to them on a recording? And I just love these posts where the user asks, does anyone else blah blah blah? Yeah, nah, people can really relate to this. Hating your voice does seem to be a global phenomenon. Go to anywhere on the internet and you're going to find people complaining about how bad they sound in recordings and how hard they cringe when their voice is being played back to them. So all these posts serve as the backbone of today's lecture, which I want to thank everyone for attending. In today's world, where putting yourself out there, let's say via social media or other means, can be tremendously rewarding, something I've personally learned quite well over the past few months, anxious people are always on the lookout for excuses not to put themselves out there. They're afraid to take that step. And listening to your own voice and realizing that you don't like the sound of it is one of the biggest hurdles, one of the biggest stumbling blocks that actually prevents people from taking that step, from actually clicking record and putting themselves on camera in front of an audience. They keep themselves back from doing so because, well, of a myriad of reasons, but because once they try recording themselves for the first time and then they listen and cringe like hell, they see that and tell themselves, no, this is not for me. This is not something I want to do. So this is essentially the point of this lecture. I want to discuss how hating your voice can absolutely wreck your creative productivity. I'm going to use myself as a personal example, and what we can do about it. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you of course might know me by my screen name, Anxious Alex. In real life, I'm a microeconomics researcher at the University of Cambridge, where I've worked for the past 7 years. And I'm also a book author specialized on anxiety and perfectionism. So, you know, as Einstein famously said, never let a good self-promotion opportunity go to waste. No need to double check that. Everything I say is absolutely true. This is my book that I'm only going to briefly mention here before we actually start the lecture. It's called What You're About to Read Isn't Perfect, as you can see on screen. And it deals with precisely this side of things where you want to engage in a creative activity, but feel that resistance, that fear that prevents you from doing so. This book touches upon where this comes from and gives some very concrete strategies about what to do about it. But never mind all that. In this lecture, we're going to focus on, as I said, one specific hurdle, which is this idea of hating your voice. So, you know, because this lecture is gonna go up on YouTube, we absolutely need to have an iceberg in order to present the contents of the lecture. So in order to get the full picture, we need to do like 3 separate things. The first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to elaborate on why hating your voice can be a major hurdle to your creative productivity. As you can see here, I label this section, Why Hating Your Voice Can Destroy Your Life, which, a bit hyperbolic, you're going to see it's really interesting how we set up these barriers in our mind, preventing us from actually working on our projects. Then, in the second part of the lecture, we're going to take on a positive spin. I'm going to explain why hating your voice is not only counterproductive, but it's also stupid, like really stupid. We're going to see here, we're going to have a look at a few scientific studies here that essentially go over why hating your own voice is nonsensical and how you can get over it. And finally, I'm going to end with some philosophical mumbo-jumbo about, you know, what this whole hating our own voice thing tells us about creativity, productivity, and our self-worth to begin with. And I hope to have here a few, more general takeaways that can help us guide us forward in our quest for creative productivity. So before we begin, I've actually just received one question from the audience, which says, is this something that your students struggle with? And oh boy, abso-fucking-lutely. So one of the things I do in Cambridge is that I, teach and supervise lots of students. And of course, they always have to do things like presentations or speaking in front of an audience. And this sort of hurdle, such as hating your own voice, is one of the most common things that holds people back and gives them stage fright. So if there are any students in the audience who have a sort of presentation soon, or if you have people working office jobs that have to give a talk to the manager or something like that, learning to be comfortable with yourself and your own voice is one of the best things you can do for a more to achieve a more charismatic, a better stage presence. It's something that's going to pay off dividends in spades if you learn exactly how to do it. Okay, without further ado, let's do this. So in order to understand why hating our voice can absolutely sabotage our productivity, we need to understand what exactly it is we're sabotaging. We live in a world where the spotlight is often on us, and more so than ever, we're expected to put ourselves out there, be it in the form of a social media presence such as YouTube or TikTok or whatnot, or be it in the form of giving presentations and talks for our company, school, whatever. If you can master the art of stage presence, if you can become more charismatic and whatnot, you can reap a lot of benefits. You can better send your message, you can gather an audience, you can ultimately obtain better financial rewards. Say you wrote a book, wink wink. There is a lot to do in terms of marketing, in terms of promoting your brand. So the core message here is that a lot can be obtained with the courage to put yourself out there. However, this is where our bloody psychology kind of comes into play here, because although putting ourselves out there is more rewarded now than it has ever been in the past, there's a big but, a very big but to this whole thing, which ironically enough is going to be our brain. You see, putting yourself out there, creating content for the world, promoting your brand, explaining things, presenting things, can take a huge psychological toll, which is again something I discuss in depth in my book. It is tough psychologically for us to become vulnerable in front of an audience. We feel exposed, we feel uncomfortable, we feel naked in some sense. When I started my journey as a YouTuber a few months ago, one of the biggest things that was constantly at the back of my mind was, how are others going to perceive me? Are they going to, laugh at me? Are they going to cringe at what I said? And a lot of these things really eat into your confidence, because you start putting all these unjustified barriers in front of you. You start fearing exposing yourself and becoming vulnerable. So the gist here is that although this is going to be highly rewarded, you're going to be very afraid to do so. And the biggest problem that I want to home in on here is that when we are confronted with this stressful situation of us putting ourselves in front of an audience, we're going to look for scapegoats not to do it. Oh, we're not conventionally attractive. Oh, we're not interesting or charismatic enough, etc., etc. And in this context, hating your voice is actually one of the biggest hurdles and one of the biggest scapegoats that you can imagine. Because let's imagine a scenario. Let's say you want to, surprise, surprise, put a video on YouTube. You take out your camera, you record yourself, and then listen to that recording. Well, you know, if you're like 90% of us, the first thing that you're going to do is cringe to hell and back from actually listening to yourself talk. So then it's easy to imagine that after listening to that recording, the first thing you're going to do is, well, this is not for me. I sound like shit. Why would I want others to be exposed to this? Why would I want others to listen to this? And therefore, you decide that it's better for yourself and for the entire world not to put yourself out there, not to continue with this journey, then renouncing the rewards we discussed before. So you can now understand why this is a major problem and why it's a major hurdling block for our creative productivity. And just to build up on this, I just received this question from the audience. Can you comment on AI-generated voices? And this is actually really interesting. And we've seen an explosion, you know, of AI-related stuff, but also AI-voiced videos. And I personally don't like them at all. It feels robotic and cold. But I understand why people do this. I understand why people might want to go to this sort of AI-generated models, because exactly, they shield themselves from this potential vulnerability, from this fear of other people hearing their voice and cringing in turn, just as they cringed at their voice. So, you know, this is a potential solution. I'm not discounting it. It's a first, if you want to become, you know, if you want to put content out there, it's one step, and there are lots of people who do this very successfully. But I feel if you want to build your charisma and stage presence and kind of become more confident as a result, this is a bit of a crutch that you should work on and try to, you know, repair your self-belief. And let me give you an example to illustrate what I mean when I say that hating your voice can really eat into your productivity. So I don't know who in the audience is. Some of you might be familiar with it, with this subreddit, r/newtubers. So essentially, this is a very helpful subreddit for people wanting to get into content creation on Reddit, on YouTube. This is a subreddit dedicated to giving advice to people and having a chat in a community with YouTubers that are just starting off. I learned plenty of really interesting things there that, you know, might have benefited my videos. You be the judge of that. Regardless, this is a really good case study of this whole phenomenon, because what people do here is that they post the various issues they stumbled upon in their content creation journey and the various stumbling blocks towards putting themselves out there and making themselves and their content known. And let me tell you, it's an entire thing of people posting about just how uncomfortable they are with their voice, just how much of a hurdle this thing can be. Have a look at this from Mr. Virtual Avocado. Does anyone else feel uncomfortable with their own voice? How do other YouTubers get a consistent voice? It really bugs me out. And I don't know if it hurts the possible viewing retention. So again, we have this scapegoat of putting our voice as a barrier to our creative endeavors. And you can see that people can relate. This guy received 120 comments. What am I supposed to do when literally everyone hates my voice? Literally everyone. Now, you know, I don't want to be an armchair psychologist here, but it's very understandable. When I first started making these videos, I felt as if everyone would just click off them because my voice is just nasal. Let's face it, I would just fear that they, it would scare people off, it would put them off and have them immediately click off. I hate the sound of my voice and it keeps me from posting more regularly. Now this one, has 14 upvotes, but it captures exactly what I want to say here. We create this resistance, this nonsense in our mind where we would like to post more regularly, we would like to put more content out there. However, we stop ourselves because we hate our own voice. We hate how our content sounds in our head, and we feel that this is going to push the audience away, in turn pushing us away from actually creating, valuable, useful stuff. Another one, I want to start YouTube, but I hate the sound of my own voice. So if you're in this situation, if this is what you're thinking, then stick around for the second part, where I'm going to, scientifically demonstrate that hating your own voice is nonsense and that you can get over it. And I'm going to talk a bit about what I did to do so. Okay, and this is kind of, the ray of hope. Oh, fuck. This is kind of the ray of hope in Pandora's box, if you want. It says, to those who hate the sound of your own voice, you will get over it. And I really like this message. You can go ahead and read this post. It's going to be linked somewhere, I hope. But this is kind of the message that I want to send here as well. We want to put ourselves out there. We know it's going to be rewarded, yet we have this hurdle that we need to overcome. And let me tell you, overcoming it, seeing yourself becoming more comfortable on, in front of others, in front of an audience, is one of the best feelings you can imagine. And it's never going to be perfect, don't get me wrong. There's still going to be that, devil in the back of your mind, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to become just 1% more comfortable. Okay, so let me end this section with a question from the audience, which is, what if you actually have an annoying voice that puts people off? And this is a great segue to the second part of what I'm going to talk about here, because let me be very clear. It's entirely possible that some people will dislike your voice. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people out there right now who are just cringing and being like, oh, will this guy not shut up? But what I'm going to argue in the second part of this video is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if some people dislike your voice. You should still continue on with your content creation process and you will receive the rewards. And I'm going to explain exactly why modern day algorithms kind of ensure that it doesn't really matter if you have a few haters. So, in trying to fix this issue, let's get the obvious out of the way. This is probably something you've heard before many times, but when did that ever stop me from repeating the obvious? The thing you have to understand is that one of the main reasons you're uncomfortable with your own voice is that it sounds different on recordings from how it sounds in your own head. So the second you listen to yourself on a recording when making a piece of content, you're obviously going to cringe, not because there's something necessarily wrong with your voice, but because it sounds different from what you expect it to sound in your head. And usually it sounds different in a worse way, And this is where our friend science comes in. So I'm going to go over this article, which was published in, I don't remember, but I got this from, The Guardian or something. I probably should cite my sources better. But anyway, So I'm going to cite a specific study mentioned in this article here. You can see it's titled, "The Real Reason the Sound of Your Own Voice Makes You Cringe." Does the sound of your own voice make you want to cover your ears? You are not alone. We've seen many examples, and I'm pretty sure 90% of the people in this audience can relate. But anyway, I don't really want to repeat what I've already said. The reason I'm citing this article is because it gives a really nice explanation of what is going on here. So let's cite from this University of Essex psychologist, Dr. Paulman, who said, "I would speculate that the fact that we sound more high-pitched than what we think we should leads us to cringe, as it doesn't meet our internal expectations," which is exactly what I was saying, and it's exactly how I felt when I first recorded one of these things. Because the minute I pressed play on that recording, I just asked myself, who is this high-pitched, nasal, uncharismatic little bitch talking in this recording? It was absolutely ridiculous, the type of dissonance that I found. But this is exactly it, right? Because in our head, our voice is going to sound a bit deeper. And it continues, "Our voice plays a massive role in forming our identity, and I guess no one likes to realize that you're not really who you think you are. First of all, deep. And second of all, this is exactly right. When you're building content, when you're putting yourself out there, or, just attending presentations, you're becoming vulnerable. You're exposing a persona. And if that persona in any way falls short of the expectations you've set for yourself, you're of course going to feel bad and are going to be less likely to, engage in this sort of content, in this sort of activity. So, we're already kind of going into the philosophical mumbo jumbo that I want to discuss at the end, but I think it's really important to bring up here understanding why we hate our own voice. It has nothing to do with our voice. It has to do with the contrast between what actually happens and what we expect to happen. But you can see why, from an outsider's perspective, this whole thing doesn't matter, because the outsider doesn't have the same sort of expectation concerning our persona and our voice that we do. So a lot of the people in our audience, a lot of the people listening to us give a presentation, are not going to feel the same sort of cringe instinct that we feel, just because this dissonance by definition doesn't exist. They would cringe at their own voice, but they're not going to cringe at yours because there's no reference point. And in this article, there's also this scientific study that was studied. This scientific article being presented. I like my voice better, self-enhancement bias in perceptions of voice attractiveness. And this is one of the best things you can read if you have self-confidence issues regarding your own voice. So I'm not going to go into too much depth. The article is linked in the description for you science nerds. But the basic idea here is that people recorded themselves and then they were given a selection of voice recordings to listen to and to rate as how attractive, assertive, whatever they find it. And guess what they found? When these voices were presented to them at random, so people didn't really know which of them were their own voice, they rated their own voice more attractive than those of others. So what this tells us is that if you don't know what your voice is on a recording, if you don't know that it's your voice, you're going to find it more attractive than you do others, which goes back to the point that the cringe we feel has nothing to do with our voice, but it has everything to do with the contrast between what we hear and what we expect to hear. Oh, and finally, there's one last thing I want to discuss here. If you're still, on the edge, if you're thinking, man, this guy is full of shit, my voice is really bad and people sure do hate it, like a lot of these people on Reddit or on newtubers. So here's the thing, let's be honest. some people are going to hate your voice. It's just unavoidable. The second you put yourself out there, you're going to have haters. In fact, if we're gonna be a bit philosophical about this, you don't want to not have haters, because having haters can be really good for engagement, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, even if some people actually dislike your voice, which they will, in today's creator economy, it really doesn't matter. And the reason for this is very simple. Most people who are going to dislike your voice are going to click off your content anyway. What matters is for you to create value and make sure you are entertaining and whatnot to the people that inherently don't have a problem with your voice, because those people are going to stick around. So instead of, trying to doctor your voice, making sure you sound deep, pulling a Elizabeth, what's her ass, or whatever, instead of doing all that nonsense, just focus on the message, focus on the content you want to create, and on the value that you wish to provide for the people that are not going to have a problem with your voice. Because it is these people that are going to consume your content. It is these people that are going to be the base on which you promote your brand, or you create something for the world to enjoy. The people who don't like your voice don't matter. The algorithm is going to discount them anyway as time goes on. Before we conclude, I just want to give a quick shout out to my channel, which perfectly illustrates this. Although I started a few months ago, as kind of a part-time thing in addition to my work as a researcher at Cambridge, I started doing this channel because I felt there's a lot of things that needed to be said that weren't said out there, and we've nearly hit 200 subscribers who, despite my nasal voice, have decided to stick around. So thank you very much for that, and let's continue on with this beautiful journey of ours. I guess the takeaway here really is, bitch, you've got this. So, throughout this lecture, we essentially talked about two things. We mentioned why hating your own voice can be a major stumbling block towards your creative productivity and towards putting yourself out there. But then we also talked about how it's basically all nonsense and how you hate your voice for all the wrong reasons that ultimately don't matter. So I guess, the practical takeaway here is just go for it. Trust me, there are a whole other things a whole host of, trust me, there's a whole host of other things that you can work on in, besides actually fixing your voice, which you shouldn't try. And ultimately, you're going to be quite happy with it. Your confidence is going to catch up. And just like with many things in life, it's just a matter of practice. The more exposed you are to your videos, to your recordings, the more comfortable you're going to become. And this kind of brings me to the main philosophical message I wanna send across here, in that what you're ultimately doing here is realizing what matters and what doesn't matter for charisma and self-confidence, and focusing on the things that you can control is always a lot better than despairing and tying yourself in knots over the things you can control. So, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought. Have you ever been uncomfortable with your own voice? I really wanna hear. Are you still uncomfortable with it? And if so, what are you doing to work on it? Okay, let's have another look at this brilliant, insightful summary of the lecture we just have. And yeah, catch you all on the flippity.